So please welcome Dr. Robert Bray to the show. Welcome, Dr. Robert Bray.
So happy to be here. I'm glad I
Oh,
get a chance to talk with you and the people who you're reaching out to and connecting with in the world. Um,
yes. All the way from San Diego, right down the street. So how fun is that? I love when I meet my neighbors. And
well, it's interesting because I'm a native San Diegan. So at 73, there aren't many of me around. So anytime I meet anybody who's living in San Diego, I feel pleased about that.
yes. So looking and going down your rabbit hole and understanding what you love so much. It's like I've known EFT, emotional freedom technique.
Oh, good.
That's like the regular, that's just been in my life, right? And so
Okay.
then when I start learning about yours,
Uh-huh.
and I think, okay, I've never heard of thought field
Well, that's
therapy.
interesting because thought field therapy is the original meridian stimulation treatment program. Dr. Roger Callahan developed it starting way back in the 80s.
Huh.
He was a psychologist who had just fascinated man, but he was very curious about the world. He had a good private practice doing cognitive stuff and was doing really well. And then he learned about something called kinesiology muscle testing. And then he said, "Oh, this is interesting." So he went and took a course in it. He's one of the few non-chiropractors who
Oh.
were ever taught how to do kinesiology. And then he began to find ways to apply it to psychological states and conditions. And so by the late 80s, Jesus, he had developed this into a pretty powerful technique and then went on to percept the protocols were developed over time through experimentation.
Hmm.
And he was very much an empiricist. He was trained as a psychologist. After World War II, he was a baby boomer who came back from World War II and said, "Oh, I get to go to college," which was the first time he found out that he was smart. He was raised in
Oh.
poverty. He was raised in a world that wasn't so great. Um, and then he began to develop. So when he got his PhD in psychology, he went to Syracuse University and University of New York. And the reason he went there is because at the time it was the most cutting edge way to do psychology. He was person-centered kind of stuff, Carl Rogers kind of work. But anyway, after that, he went on to be trained by Albert Ellis, who was the first cognitive therapist and developed cognitive rational emotive therapy. And then after he developed that, he built his own practice. He was a university professor, did research, that kind of stuff. And the reason I'm talking about it, because I admire the man greatly. And I worked
Yeah.
with him for a lot of years. And then when he learned kinesiology and he began to apply that to psychological states and conditions, he was just like, this is a whole new thing. And so he did that for many years. And you learned EFT from Gary Craig's work. Gary Craig was a student of Roger Callahan's for three
Okay.
years. And after they parted ways after 3 years because they had a very different perspective and orientation. Roger was a psychologist who'd been doing this work his whole life. Gary Craig was a businessman and an engineer. And I think he had a different way of thinking about what could be done with EFT. And I think it was good. Now, I don't want to discourage anybody out there who's doing EFT. If it's working for you,
Right.
keep doing it. Keep
Right.
doing what works. And that's who Roger was always like, okay, if it's working, that's good. But the problem is when it doesn't work, what do you do? Um,
Right.
and that's where if you understand thought field therapy, you know what to do. Um,
If it's not working.
right. Yeah. If
Okay.
it's working for you, that's fine. But if it's not, or if you want to do some pretty amazing things beyond what they do with EFT, then use some TFT techniques. So anyway,
Yeah.
I learned in 96, I learned it from Dr. Callahan. And so for many years, I was a trainer for he and his wife for Callahan Techniques. And for many years, especially towards the end, if they needed training done and he couldn't do it or wasn't up to it, they'd send me out to do it. And so I really do know what's underneath all of this stuff.
Right. What called you to do that? What was that fascinating to you? What is
Oh,
your
it's
background?
well, um, uh, as I say, I'm 73, and you got to go back a ways. But the truth of the matter is that I've always been very good at connecting with people at a deep emotional level very quickly. And so when I was in college, I was a volunteer at the Help Center. It's here at San Diego State. It was one of the first drop-in hotline centers in the US. And what we would do is they would train these college kids, I think of, 19, 20, and how to pick up a phone and say, how can I help you today? And it could be anywhere from, I think I'm going to kill myself, to
Oh,
I'm having a bad trip, to, I'm about to be drafted and I don't know how I'm going to cope. So it's crisis intervention kinds of things. And so I learned that early on, and I found that I was really good at it, very naturally good at it. And so then I sort of stayed in that realm. I got a bachelor's in social work from San Diego State. And then I went on and got a master's of social work at San Diego State. And then I went on and got a PhD in psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy at United States International University. You may have been around at a time when that was there. And all the time, it was about me trying to help people in ways that I thought were effective. And it's just who I am, that it's my nature to want to do that.
hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
That's how I
I went
got
to San
into it.
Diego State.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
you did?
graduated. Yep.
Yeah.
Um,
We probably graduated different years.
well, I'm 56, so I think I graduated in 92.
Yeah, I got my PhD in 93. So a little difference
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this now.
Mhm.
When, so I've been watching you and I've been doing the tapping.
Mhm.
And so I understand, I can even feel the difference. And I know because of EFT and doing that, I
Yeah.
understand that. But will you explain, when you put into the meridians and he studied the areas, because it is different than EFT. The areas are different. So will you
Well,
explain that?
the points are the same. There are 14 different meridian points that Dr. Callahan developed that we stimulate. And
Right.
that goes to the meridians, because there's 12 organ meridians and then two strange flows. But so it's the same 14 points you do in EFT. In TFT, we do them in a different order.
Right.
And um, it's the order of the tapping that holds the information that then makes the change at the fundamental level of the thought field or the control mechanism. So the tapping is important, just to be more efficient, to know which area to tap before you start. Um, um, you said you tried some TFT and you noticed a
Yeah, I've been
difference?
doing it because I've been studying you. But
Okay, so what are you
but
noticing is the
I
difference?
want I can understand the feeling when I'm done with a session. And I was trying to think of, I was doing all these different things, the abundance one, the pause, all the different
Mhm.
you have ones focused on different things,
Yeah,
but I need you to explain to me because you start with the side of your hand.
right.
And why do you like, can you explain that
Okay,
why we go
so
here to
right.
here to here to here?
Okay. So let me just uh, finish your question about you were asking about the mechanism of action. So why does tapping on anything make a difference?
Right.
Well, there's a great article by David Feinstein that's just he's a PhD who's been studying this a long time. And he says there's 6 different ways that it could be affecting it. And we don't have to get into all of that. But what you need to know is when you're tapping like this on a meridian point, a way to think about it is you're changing this mechanical energy here. As you
Right.
hit the cells, you're changing into cellular energy. That cellular energy then is turned into electromagnetic energy through the flow of ions on one side of the cell wall or another. And then that electrical energy affects the meridian energy that runs through the body. And the
Okay.
meridian energy then connects to the fundamental control mechanism of the human body, like a central computer unit, right? And it goes in there and provides the information that then says, oh, this is the problem. Let's fix the problem. Provides that information, and then it comes back into the body again. So that's one way to think about it.
Hmm.
But the way that you know, so for example, you're tapping on this point because with the work that we do, because it's a correction for psychological reversal. It's when you're in a state that your energy is flowing the wrong way. And it could be at a cellular energy or an organ or a meridian level. But if the energy of the body flows the wrong way, no healing mechanism is going to work. That was his first great discovery.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so,
What do you mean by that? Flowing the wrong way?
well, um, what we know is that there's an orientation that exists within us to, some say, if you say higher source, you can say it goes up to the heavens or down to the earth, but you could say it's a north-south polar orientation because we live on this planet with that orientation.
Right.
If our cells are oriented in that way, then the system works. But if you flip it around, it doesn't work. You know, it's back when they had transistor radios, right? You'd pull a battery out, and if you
Hmm.
flipped it over and put it back in, the radio don't work because the flow of
Okay.
energy isn't right. So
Right.
part of what you do sometimes when you're tapping is you correct that, and that's a simple correction for specific reversal. Now there's
Wow.
6 different types of reversals that you can deal with, and he has a test for each one of those. So, but and that's how he started. He said he hold his tell his client, hold your arm out and tell me you want to be over the smoking problem. And the arm would go weak, and he'd go, that's strange. Because usually if you make a true statement, an honest statement, you're strong. And
Right.
he'd say, what is that? Because he knew his clients really well. And he knew the guy wanted to be over the smoking. He wanted to live.
Right.
And so he started trying to experiment with what would make that arm stay strong. What would help the person stay in that right orientation? And he found that there were 3 ways that he could correct that. So he could have them tap the side of their hand and he do the same test, and now it works.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
so that was he began to recognize that. And then he said, oh, if you can change the energy in the body by stimulating meridian treatment points, there's a lot of ways you can do it. I mean, you could use rescue remedy, you could use homeopathic salts, but you know, the easy way is just stimulate that point. That sends a message. That message then resets the system. And the thing about thought reversals, sometimes they happen overall, sometimes they're just in certain domains of your life. But he had muscle testing for all of that.
Wow. That's
And
so
so
neat.
if you want to know precisely, you can muscle test precisely what's going on. That's what I loved about thought field therapy when I was first introduced to it. There is a test to see what you need, there's a test to see what you should do, and there's a
Hmm.
test to see if it worked. So it wasn't guesswork.
Right.
Um, and it was very powerful, very effective. Um, and what it does, the way I talk about it now is that I think from the way we look at like trauma, traumatic stress response and stuff, is it's a way to downregulate the sympathetic nervous system. Because when you're in an overactivated state, nothing works. And you can't even
Right.
think, you know.
Right.
Is that helpful? Is that
Yeah, that's helped me. I mean, so when you go from, so it's the side of your hand that you're going to change the north to south pole.
mhm.
Okay. So you can just do that to like sit here and I could make sure that it's going to bring my body back into alignment.
Well, it's a way to think about that. And then the thing is that you're looking at the crisis tapping pattern. And the crisis tapping pattern is the one that I have on my business card and I give to everybody. And I say, here, this is what you should do because I only get one shot at you. If you're in a state of reversal, it's not going to work. So
Right.
that's why I start by correcting this reversal. And then the tapping under the nose is to correct what we call PR level 2. One is oriented toward the present, one is oriented towards the future. And that sometimes gets in the way. And then
Okay, wait,
depending
explain that. What do you mean by that? The
well, okay,
future.
so when you can muscle test for reversals, what you're going to find is that you can correct a reversal and it works fine, the treatment, but the problem doesn't go away. It goes from a set of 7 down to about 4, and you're going, why didn't it go all the way down? And he would say it's because there was a reversal in the midst of the treatment, so the treatment couldn't complete.
Hmm.
And that reversal has to do with the fact that you move from thinking about and orienting yourself in that problem in the past or right now into orientation towards the future.
Okay.
So like the words that you use for testing are different. I will be over this problem is the muscle test for a specific PR. I will be over this problem. I'm sorry. I um sorry. I want to be over this problem is the test for a specific one. It's in this moment. It's what you want in this moment. Now, if you need to go to the next one, it's I will be over this. So you've changed your orientation and changed the way you're interacting with that particular thought field.
Hmm.
And so there's a different correction for that. Again, I don't want to overcomplicate this for people because
No, it's good.
well, it's my key here is that it sounds like you really do have some understanding of some of these things. What I worry about is the people who are listening who don't have your experience with EFT or don't have as broad a knowledge as you do in these kinds of energetic things.
Right. So don't
So,
go too deep, right?
well,
And I like to go deep, but I think with my
well,
thing, I didn't know that was a correct. I never knew that about correction. So that's a new
well,
thing.
there's a couple of things that happen in EFT. So, for example, in EFT, they use this tapping. I love myself even though I have this problem, right? They're using words.
Right.
They're using affirmations to do that. And the thing is that in EFT, it became part of the protocol for how it's done. In TFT, we don't ask you to say anything. We know you've tuned to it. We know you're in touch with your body, and that's all we need. We don't need you to have words.
Hmm.
And the problem is that the words that they're using are words that Roger used to test for different types of reversal. And so people start to think, oh, that's important that you say those words. Well, Roger stopped saying those words, in 96, 97, because the words complicate things so much for people.
Okay.
Um, and the other part of that is that people will think, well, it's an affirmation, so that's a good thing. Well, affirmations are okay if you believe them. What we know, there's some good research that suggests that if you start using affirmations over and over and over again, but you don't really believe them, you're just reinforcing that negative, I can't do things. You're reinforcing it doesn't work for me. You're reinforcing that message of, no, you're not, no, you're not. Um,
Right. That's stronger than
yeah,
the,
so we don't use affirmations in TFT. Now, I'm not opposed to them. And I do a lot of different kinds of things. I was trained by some wonderful people over the last 50 years. And so as a psychotherapist, I will do a lot of things. But the difficulty here is, and I often have explain this to people, there's applications for thought field therapy in all types of work, but in professional mental health kind of space, we think about the way I categorize it, there's 3 things we do. We do crisis intervention, which is to calm you down, get you back to a place where you were before whatever it was that happened, so that you can think and operate the way you did before it all happened. Because that's crisis intervention. And then there's counseling, which is, okay, now that we've got you calmed down and we got you functioning like you were before, let's engage in a process of determining how can you be better? And what do you want to change about the way you behave, the way you act, the way you interface with the world, that is going to make you more comfortable? allow you to have more love and to give more love. Now that's counseling, and that's a different kind of thing. That doesn't happen just in an instant. That's in a relationship, and then you begin to point out some things about this is the way you can think differently. So that's
Right.
where cognitive becomes more important. But again, only if you're deregulated. If you've, I'm sorry, if you've downregulated that upset, because until you do that, you can't think. So you might be counseling somebody, you might trigger them into a previous event. And at that point, they're not thinking anymore. They're not engaging. So what you do is you can tap them back down, then you can begin to engage the top of the brain where you can think, where you can take in new data and analyze it and come to a problem kind of solving process and come to some kind of way of developing a plan that says, this is what I want to do, and then take the action. But none of that happens when the bottom of the brain is hijacked. Talk about the amygdala hijacking the brain. Well, that's what it is. You can't think, and you can't reason with anybody who's in that state. You know,
Right.
um,
You had a great example, and it's not a nice story, but it kind of helped me understand that the process that you just explained was the woman that was there when her son got shot, and she watched him die, like in her arms, and she couldn't get that visual out of her mind.
right, right.
Will you explain that
Oh well,
story?
for a number of years, I used to go to the a National Victims Organization. That was a group of people who've been victimized by crime. And it's a large conference still going on. And I would always get a group of people coming to my workshop when I would say, let me show you ways to deal with these overwhelming things. And I was probably 140 people in the room. And I said, I need a volunteer. And as often happened, I got this woman who had a murdered son come up and say, I can't get over it. I'm stuck in this place. And so she was very kind and saying, I'll try anything. And let's see what we can do. And so I asked her, what was the image that she had in her mind that she couldn't get rid of? So the image was that her son had been shot in a drive-by shooting. He came into the house and ended up in her arms, and he was in her arms as he died. And so what she saw was watching the life drain out of her son. And that was an image that just haunted her for, I think it had been 3 years since it happened when she came to see me at the conference. And I said, well, let's see if we can bring that down a little bit. So we did some crisis tapping and we tried to reduce that overwhelming feeling she was having. And as she felt that changing in her body, I asked her what was changing in terms of the vision that she was holding in her mind and what was going on. And she said, oh, well, now I'm just not locked into his eyes. I can begin to see him again. I can begin to recognize where I am, and it's not so much. So we tapped again, right? And I said, so how's it feeling now? And what are you noticing with the vision now? And she said, well, now I can kind of get a little space back and I'm looking and I can see my son is there. I can see the situation. I can see what's around me. And she was still feeling quite overwhelmed by all of that. So we did another round of tapping. When I asked her the next time, what do you see now? She said, oh, and for the first time, what she realized was that standing in the doorway of that room was her other son who was witnessing this whole thing.
Mm.
And she'd had no real remembrance of her son, her other son, living son, still being there. And so it was wonderful because we finished that. And I said, so let's do another round. And she says, no, I know what I need to do. And what was it? She said, I need to go home and live and love my living son.
Hmm.
Oh, just wiped me out. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's the kind of thing that can happen when you bring those memories from the past into a place where there are memories, not flashbacks. So
Right.
suddenly she wasn't experiencing it again. She remembered it happened. And in that memory, she could pull in new information about her son. Is that the
When you're
story you
do
had in mind?
what?
Is that the story you had in mind?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Okay.
I think it just helped me understand, when people are in that trauma, they've experienced all that. I mean, what a terrible thing, and how
Oh, yeah.
that just the tapping part can help
Yeah.
their, I mean,
Right.
re-regulate their brain.
Right. And what I think that it does when when you're working with trauma, I think one of the things that it does when people have a flashback experience, I mean, the hallmark of PTSD is the inability to discern the difference between the there and then when something was happening and the here and now where it's not.
Hmm.
There and then when your life was at risk or somebody you love's life was at risk, and you were being harmed, to the here and now. In this room that you're sitting with me, um, there's no risk, there's no harm. And if you can come into this moment fully present to that and look back and say, okay, that did happen to me, that is a memory. That's okay to have it as a memory. It's not okay to have it as it's happening again right now.
Right, right.
And that's part of what I do with people is help them make these terrible events into memories that you have as memories, not as flashback experiences. Um, it's a little like you take a picture off the mantle and you look at it and you think, "Oh, I remember that," and I had feelings about it then, and I have feelings about it now, and it's real. It's part of my life. And then when you're done thinking about it, talking about it, you put it back on the mantle and go on. When you
Right.
have a flashback, you can't put it back on the mantle.
Right.
So that's part of what's so powerful about using energy psychology um, in doing crisis intervention work.
And
Let
you've
me back up a little bit because
okay.
I just want to finish. So the three ways that I categorize the kinds of things that professionals do with this kind of stuff is crisis intervention, counseling, and then the third is what I term as psychotherapy. And what psychotherapy does is it helps you change the way you perceive information and the way you react to information. So at the deepest level, we're going to change the learning, we're going to change the reactivity that happens in regards to certain kinds of things. That's when you're really different, because that's when you're operating in your mature mind today, and making decisions and able to make decisions, to use the top of your brain, to take you where you want to go. But to do that, you have to go back and realize the brain is set up to be a predictive machine. It's like you get some data and you get a response. The brain
Right.
is about trying to figure out what's the best response in that moment that's going to have the best outcome. And then when you learn it, then that's what you do. Oh, kid touches a piece of hot fire, right? Hot stove, right? Now, immediately you learn that's not good. And you learn that pulling back and avoiding that is the way that you have to deal with this. Okay. And so you don't ever want to go near a stove again, right?
Right.
But as we mature, we begin to understand no, we have more options than just that reactive kind of thing that we did as a child. Sometimes you need to grip a hot stove. Um, you know, um, but what we do in psychotherapy is help you identify that fundamental learning and to change the way that you perceive what's going on and to be able to predict a different outcome and make different choices. So that's psychotherapy.
Hmm. When
Um,
you're tapping, when you say the crisis
right.
tapping,
Right.
are there different sequences that you do? Like when you did the abundance one, the anxiety?
Mostly what you're seeing me do is try to get the anxiety out of people's ways. I tend to believe that we're born with all kinds of capacities for love and brilliance, and interacting and caring and all those kinds of things. And what gets primarily in our way of any of that is our own internal fear. And whether
Mhm.
that's from a big T trauma that's happened to us, somebody coming at me with a car, or a little T trauma, somebody saying, no, you don't think that way. No, you don't feel that. And you begin to learn, oh, I have to be that way, or I don't survive as a baby, right?
Right.
So it could be one of those kinds of traumas. but you have to be able to recognize it and to deal with it and put it in the past and be in your mature adult moment that you are, or as adult as you can be.
Right. But how is it when you say there's certain tapping techniques for
Oh, okay.
each thing?
So this is the thing about EFT. Gary Craig said it doesn't matter where you tap or what order you tap in. All that matters is that you tap. Now, that's fundamentally different than Roger's perspective, which is the reason that we tap the way we do is because your body informed us that was the right order. So you would muscle test. Now,
Okay.
after he tested a few thousand people, he found like, well, if somebody is feeling guilt or shame, it's a different tapping pattern. So if you're feeling shame, you tap here, under here. Oh, I'm sorry, that's guilt here. If you're feeling shame, you tap here and here. You're feeling uh, um, uh, anger, you tap here, you tap here. It's different patterns that evolved out of his testing and doing
Muscle
work with
testing.
people. And
Huh.
Gary said, well, that's too complicated. And, you'll get a result if you just tap. Well, that's true. You get a result. But from Roger's perspective, that's not what a professional offers needs to give his clients. Is not a result. It needs to be the best result that's connected to their particular thing. So if I were to muscle test with you, either in person or virtually, if we connected, I would use myself as a surrogate
Hmm.
um, tester, and treat. You would see something different. Oh, you want to try something? Let's try it. Is there some
Let's do it.
piece that you've struggled to clear up that whenever you think of it in the past, something from the past that whenever you think of it, you still feel these feelings that are not okay? That would be a place to start.
Okay. Sure. Got it.
You got one?
Yep.
Okay. And as you pull it up, tell me what you notice in your body.
It's tight.
And where do you feel the tension? A whole body's tight or a particular place?
um, like my heart and my stomach area.
Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is ask you, how bad is that feeling on a 0 to 10 scale? And this is one of the innovations Roger came up with to say, we don't know what your experience is, but maybe if you tell me on a 0 to 10 scale, I'll have a better understanding.
Right.
So 0 to 10, how tight, with 0 being no tightness in your tummy, relaxed wherever you're, and 10 being the worst you can imagine. Now, I'm not imagining, probably not the worst it can be in this moment because we're having a conversation. But what's the number you'd give it right now?
6.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to muscle test for you.
Okay.
All right? Okay.
Yep.
So and the easiest way to do this on a video is I just use my finger. So Ashley, if you would just say, my name is Ashley.
My name is Ashley.
Okay, that's a strong response. Now say my name is George.
My name is George.
Now that's a weak response. My finger doesn't come up, right?
Right.
So what I would like you to do is think about that event. And you don't have to tell us what it is, but think about that event and just say, healing this event.
Healing this event.
Okay, my finger doesn't move, which means that there's a disturbance in that thought field, what we call a perturbation. And I just want to make sure there's no reversals in the way and say, I want to be over this.
I want to be over this.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just touch different points on my body to see. I'm touching alarm points to see where we should start. So we should start on bladder 2 right here. So tap the beginning of the eyebrow, and then I just am testing different points on my body. Tap on the little finger. Um, Tap on the chin. Okay. Say, I want to heal this problem.
I want to heal this problem.
And now we're going to do the 9 gamut series. And originally EFT used this, they called it the bridge. I don't know if they do it anymore, but tapping the gamut spot on the back of your hand, close your eyes for a moment. Open your eyes. With your eyes, look down to the left, just with your eyes. With your eyes, look down to the right. Whirl your eyes in a big circle. Back the other way. Hum. Count. 1, 2, 3,
2,
4.
3, 4.
Then hum again. Okay. And then let's go back and repeat the points we did before. Beginning of eyebrow. Little finger. Chin. Now let's stop for a second. Now, pull up that event. Are you visual, Ashley?
I'm visual, yeah.
Okay. Pull up the picture you had before
Okay.
and tell me what you notice.
Yeah, it's definitely like a difference in my body feeling. It's probably like a 4 or 3.
Okay, so there's
Yeah.
definitely a drop. Did the picture change at all for you?
Um, yeah,
How so?
I can see that now that you say that. I've brought it a different vision of the experience and a different, um,
Different perspective?
yeah, like it may be looking at it from a place of, uh, what's the word? Hope, or like, I don't know, it just had more of
Well,
like,
a little more distance from it. So
yeah,
there's a different
distance.
sense of it.
That's a good
Okay, but
word.
let's see if we can get rid of it. Say, I want to be over this completely.
I want to be over this completely.
I will be over this completely.
I will be over this completely.
See, now that's a weakness that we correct by tapping here. That's that PR level 2. I will be over this completely.
I will be over this completely.
Healing this completely.
Healing this completely.
Start by tapping at the beginning of the eyebrow. Tap the gamut spot 30 times. And then tap under the eye. Index finger. Under the collarbone. Now, Ashley, just notice that is no standard tapping pattern.
Right.
Okay, this is your body is giving me information through the muscle testing, through the surrogate, as to precisely where you need to tap. Tap the back of your hand.
Huh.
Close your eyes. Open your eyes. Look down left. Look down right. Whirl your eyes around. Back the other way. Hum. Count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hum again.
Mm.
And go back, beginning of the eyebrow. Gamut 30.
Okay.
Under eye. Index finger. Under collarbone. Okay. Pull it up again. What do you notice?
Hmm. It's good. Way different. Gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Now that happened because I was being informed by your internal healer through the muscle testing as to what is the tapping pattern that will most effectively help you in this moment. And that's the beauty of when you learn to do it at this level, that you can have that level of precision. Before that, we're just taking best guesses and then seeing what happens and making a correction, another best guess. But that's the difference that Dr. Callahan brought to the world of, he created energy psychology because he said there's a way that we can use that information that's given to us in a very precise manner. So, you know, and anybody can do it. I've taught this stuff to, you name it, I've done it.
Mhm.
You know, one of my mission in life these days is to carry this forward. So I do a 4-day live training in which I teach people everything basically that Roger Callahan taught me and the pieces that I've added since his death. He died in 2013. And people walk away with, they can do this for themselves and they
Hmm.
can do this for other people. That's my goal. And it's, 4 days of live training. It's just wonderful.
Oh, neat. What is the science behind the eyes looking down to the left and then the right and then turning it around?
Well, Roger would describe it, and I'm not sure we have a whole lot better way of describing it other than to say that we're focusing the thought field, the place where you're holding the information in different parts of your brain. Because we know when you're humming, that's on one side. When you're counting, that's on the other side. Whoops, other way. Counting and humming, those are different locations in the brain, and it changes the way that we interact with the thought field or the control mechanism for that particular event.
Hmm,
And so he found, and there's a muscle test for each one of those things. Do you really need it? Do you not need it? This is what's going to help. And so that's, again, how he developed these things. Now, he was also trained in NLP, and so he looked at that stuff. So a lot of people think, well, he took it from NLP. Everything he did through experimentation.
right.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I was like listening to videos that were like 2020, 2021, and you were talking about, the world, and now we're in 2025. Have
Mhm.
you seen a shift in humanity in this frequency of these humans that you were working with from 50 years ago to now?
Well, what I'll tell you is uh, my usual response is that's beyond my pay grade. Okay. I can tell you that things are different than they were 50 years ago. Now, in some ways they're better, in some ways they're worse, but I don't think that's my job. I think that there's other forces at work that are changing those kinds of things. I'm not a religious man, and so I try to work from reason in this moment with people. And do I think that there might be a higher source? Sure. Do I think that we can connect to that? Sure. Those are opinions that have simply to do with beliefs that make my life easier. But
Right.
do I have evidence? I mean, this is my problem with life after death is I don't see the evidence. A lot of people tell me they have adequate evidence, but my father hasn't come back and said to me in a way that I buy that there's an afterlife. And so I try to stay away from beliefs, and that just confuses things. So part of the difficulty for me is I don't say I believe anymore.
Hmm.
I say I have concluded through the evidence that I have in my own experience, in my own subjective reality, and in the shared objective reality around me. I have evidence that leads me to these things. But, beyond that, I try to, I have people who are very much into intuitive stuff or into spiritual healings, to all of those kind of things. That's not my gift. I don't see auras. I know people who do. I think that would be really cool, but I don't. So I can't really talk about energy systems in terms of auras in that way. Can I believe, do I know that there are biofields around us? Absolutely. And I know it not only through my own experience, but through instruments that can measure biofields. Um, so yes, are we changing? God, I hope so. And right now I'm, feeling, you know, my life at this point is I am pretty much protected from all the politics, from all of the craziness that goes around. The most dangerous thing I do is drive on the freeway. And um, do I think that there are a lot of people who are hurting and dying because of decisions that are being made out of their control? Yes.
What do you incorporate? Like, what is your practice with um, this technique, with this tapping? Is that part of your morning routine? Do you find yourself in the middle of the day doing, I'm going to do this tapping, I'm feeling this way? Is that
When I
part of,
start when I start to feel overwhelmed by my feelings or by the feelings of those around me, I tap because I know that overwhelmed feeling takes me puts me in this reactive space. And when
Mhm.
I'm in the reactive space, all I want to do is shout. All I want to do is lash out. All I want to do is violence. But what I know is that's not how real change happens. I mean, I'm a social worker at core. And what I know is that it doesn't happen in an instant. And so I need to be able to think. I need to be able to strategize. I need to be able to create with other human beings a plan and take that action to make change happen. Now, that does not happen when I'm screaming at the TV session or when I am so upset because my wife is a very active political woman and very smart. Has been doing it for, she has a degree in social work, but she went a different direction than I did. And, and I'm watching her react to what's happening in the world around us and saying, this is not okay. And if I get too upset listening to her, I have to tap.
Oh, funny.
So that I can be there to support her.
Right. Oh, huh. Oh gosh, I've learned so much today. Any closing things that you want to share with everybody, or do you have any trainings coming up, or how they can
Oh, yes.
find you?
Oh, yes. Right now, I'm in the midst of a training, and I'm telling you about it because I'm going to do it again. It's 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon for 5 consecutive Tuesdays. So it's 10 hours of training where I teach the basic stuff. I don't teach any of the muscle testing, but I teach a lot of stuff that you're never going to see in EFT. And if the EFT is not working, that most of what you'll get there will improve you a great deal. And so I do that, and I'll probably do that again late in the fall. Well, probably early fall. And then starting in January, March, geez, I'm sorry,
I know, where are we,
June,
right?
yeah, June 1 of this year, I'm going to do the 4-day training again. Go down to Marina Village to the conference center there, and it's wonderful. And so there's still space available for that. And then I will, I'm actually, okay, so I'm going to be at the beginning of April, I will be in Milwaukee, Baltimore, at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation's annual Congress. They do it every 2 years. So I'm going to teach a 1-day class that's the 5, consecutive Tuesdays, but I do it all in one day. I'll do that. And I'm also presenting at the conference. And then in May, I do the conference here. At the end of May, I'm going to the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. Now, if anybody's interested in the real science behind this, if you go to their website, and that's www.energypsych.org, and you click on the research page, you'll see the 250 articles, peer-reviewed articles, that have been done supporting using energy psychology, mostly tapping.
Hmm.
And so that data is there. We have evidence. There are meta-analysis studies that show that far and above anything out there, this is the treatment that you want to use when you're working with PTSD. So there's lots of information. Anyway, that conference is happening. I'm kind of pushing it because I'm on the board of that organization. It's a great nonprofit. And I'll be presenting at that conference. And then I'm going to Texas at the end of June. I'm doing a training for the Trauma Support Services of North Texas. I'm going to do a 1-day training there. They're helping me put that together. So that's what I'm doing. And the reason I'm taking the time to do this is I know you're not going to make it to any of that, but maybe it'll encourage you to pay attention to the fact that I am moving around the country. I am
Yeah.
available. This is my passion. If anybody knows anyone who needs a trainer, I'm open to doing it.
Right. I love it.
So, one last thing. If you're interested in where you're at if you've had traumatic stress and how you're doing in recovery, if you go to my website and you tap on the button that's the recovery journey, it'll tell you with 8 questions, you answer them. It'll tell you where you're at in terms of a full recovery from traumatic stress, and you can rate where you're at. Some people are pretty pleased to see how far they've come. Some people are a little like, oh my God, I got so much more to do. But it's a very useful thing, and that's on my website too, rlbray.com.
Perfect. Love it. Oh, I've learned so much from you today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. And I love, it's like you could say however old you are, but it doesn't matter because you're so passionate about what you do. And, it's like there's no end in sight. It only gets you more excited as we get, it's
Mm.
like it's so fun to live life that way and
Oh,
live in
yeah.
your passion. And I see it
Yeah.
and feel it in you. So I love that.
Well, and I can see it in you too. And I listened to a couple of your broadcast podcasts, and I looked at some of your history, and I'm thinking, this is a woman who embraces life.
Oh,
As
thank
it
you.
comes along, she's going to say, I can do this.
Thank
You
you.
don't get stopped by your fear. You don't get blocked by disappointments. You move forward. And that's a really, I wish all of us were that way in the world. Problem is that so many of us don't have that kind of support, that kind of understanding, that kind of love that brings us to a place where we can act that way. Um, and
Oh,
that's what I want, is to be in a world full of people like you and me.
right. Oh, I love that you picked that up from listening to a couple episodes. That's amazing. Thank you. Oh, well, maybe since we're neighbors, we will meet one day in person.
Love to. Let's have lunch sometime.
Okay, I love it. Well, thank you again for being here and sharing your magic.
Thank you.